Hello, welcome to episode 1 of Doctor Who in Mind. I'm Stephen, I'm a Doctor Who fan and I suffer from depression. In the second half of this video, I'll be talking about a Peter Capaldi story, namely Thin Ice. But first, I just want to say a few words about how I came to be diagnosed with depression way back in spring of 2019. Now, that's not the start of my depression journey. I'm fully aware that I was suffering from it a fair while before that. I can't put an absolute date on it, but it had been going on a while. And what happened in the spring of 2019 was I'd just taken a week off work on holiday, perfectly normal. Now, I was doing a job where I was working night shift. I've been working night shift for about 6 months. Now, when I took on the job, I didn't think it would be an issue because I live on my own, so I can come and go as I please without it impacting on anybody else. But the problem was being on a night shift when all your friends and family are living in days, you suddenly find yourself in a different time zone to all your loved ones, and that is hard. So I did this for 6 months, and then having had a week off it, I awoke on the first morning I was due to go back to work, and I just felt the lowest I'd ever felt before, without there being any external trigger as such. Obviously, I felt lower if there's been a bereavement in the family or something like that, but this was the lowest I'd felt without any obvious outside reason. I just could not get myself out of bed in time to get to work. So I had to phone in sick to work, and then I realised, well, this is no good, Stephen. You need to do something about this because this is obviously the culmination of what's been building up for quite some time. So I phoned my local GP surgery and I made an appointment to see the doctor. This was on a Monday. Now, luckily, I was able to get an appointment for the Friday. So I went in to the office of my workplace to tell them as much as I was comfortable telling them at that point, just that I knew I had a medical problem and it was going to keep me off work for the coming week, but I had a doctor's appointment scheduled on Friday, and as soon as I'd had that, I would go in and explain the full situation to them. They were very understanding. So I spent that week worrying, obviously, and feeling down, obviously. I knew what was coming. I knew I was going to be diagnosed with depression. I'd already, well, self-diagnosed myself, hadn't I? But I was just about to make it official, which is a whole different world. Because once it's official, it's out there for everyone to see. Now, at this point in my life, now, I know that the only effective way to fight depression is out in the open. The more people who know what you're going through, the stronger your support network is. And I think in society, we're becoming a bit more open on the subject of mental health. More people understand it. The stigma isn't quite what it used to be, thank goodness. Anyway, the Friday rolled around and I went to the doctor's. It was an early morning appointment. I can't remember exactly when it'd be, 8:30, 9 a.m, something like that. Anyway, it was the first appointment of the day there. Excuse me. So I went in to the doctor and I told him the story. And bear in mind, I'd never met any of my doctors before at this practice. I mean, I'd enrolled there previously. Well, I hadn't actually enrolled there. I'd enrolled with another doctor's practice, but then that one had closed, and all the patients from my old practice got transferred to this other one. Unless we wished to make alternative arrangements ourselves. I didn't. I just let it go through. But anyway, the point is, I'd not seen a doctor for anything in donkey's years. Because well, it's a male thing, isn't it? I mean, we don't want to see a doctor under any circumstances unless we absolutely have to. And it's just ridiculous. I don't know why we have this attitude as men, but we do. Before we'll even consider seeing a doctor, you almost literally have to get to the point where body parts are falling off. And even then, you're thinking twice about whether you want to see the doctor or not. But anyway, that's just an aside. Although I do sometimes wonder if just a little fraction of the difference in life expectancy between men and women is down to men just not taking care of their health, not seeking medical advice, whereas women, in general, this is generalisation. I don't really like making generalisations, but it's true. Women are much more willing than men to seek medical help. That's just how it is. Anyway, I was sat there in the doctor's office, and I told him that I'd been feeling very low. It had been building up over some time. I explained the present circumstances of what was going on in my life, and he listened, and he asked me a few questions about how I was feeling, what sort of thoughts I got in my head. I'll just say here and now, never at any point while I've suffered from depression has my mind ever gone to the really darkest places where some depression sufferers find themselves. So we can part that to one side. I've never been that bad, but bad enough to need medical intervention to lead a relatively normal life. Anyway, he offered me three options really. He offered me two options. He said, well, you could go down the counselling route. I'm quite a shy person, and I didn't feel like sitting in a room full of strangers talking through my issues was for me. Although I did take the number and the website information that he offered me on that. Second option was medical, to put me on an antidepressant, see how that works, which was the route I went down. And the third option was a combination of the two, some sort of counselling, therapy, and the medication. I mean, in the event, I think I've had informal therapy because as soon as I announced to my friends and family that I was suffering from depression, there was a upswell of support, and I actually discovered that some of my friends have been through depression, and I didn't know that. I mean, I knew one or two had, but many more than I anticipated, and they've all been wonderful. I mean, I have people in my life I can talk about absolutely anything to, and I'm so grateful for that. Anyway, the other thing that happened at the doctor's that day was obviously as I'd not been to the doctors in donkey's years and never been to that doctor. He decided to give me a general checkup, which was blood tests and blood pressure and all the usual stuff, shining a light into your eyes and goodness knows. If you've ever just had a general checkup at the doctor, you know what I'm talking about. And he put the blood pressure attached me to the blood pressure monitor. You know, one of those that squeezes your upper arm, and then you get the digital reading. And the numbers that came up were astonishing. It was, if I remember rightly, it was 220 something over 130 something, that's astronomically high blood pressure. That's very unhealthy, dangerous even. And he was quite astonished actually, so he tried it again a couple of more times, and the results weren't quite that high the other 2 times, but they was close. So they were in that sort of ballpark. And he said to me that, you know, some of it may be what the medical profession call white coat syndrome, whereas nervous patients, when presenting at the doctors, their blood pressure and pulse just shoot up because they're that nervous. But for mine to go that high, it must be pretty high anyway. So he suggested that I make an appointment with the practice nurse, to borrow a blood pressure monitor, a more portable blood pressure monitor, to take home for the day. I would have to wear this thing for 24 hours right through, and I ended up doing that, and all the readings were high. So I ended up being put on blood pressure medication too, because if your blood pressure is high, then the ultimate destination of that is kidney damage. So if I had never been to the doctors with my depression, not only would my depression now be worse than it needed to be, I would also be on the path to serious kidney damage. Some damage had already been done. That was revealed in my blood test sample, but that was not irreversible damage. Was damage not so advanced that the kidneys won't self-repair. So that's fine. My kidneys, little damage that was done, self-repaired once I got on the blood pressure medication. So the moral of the story is, please, if you feel there is something wrong, physically, mentally, whatever, please do not hesitate to see a doctor, because you never know what else might be wrong as well as what you think is wrong. And actually, you know, regular checkups, that's a good thing. Regular blood tests, which I now have. And I have a blood pressure monitor at home, which I check my blood pressure every now and again. My blood pressure is much more healthy now. I mean, last time I took it, it was 120 something over. I can't remember what it was, but it was in the margins of safety anyway. I still have higher than average blood pressure compared to the average person, but it's not dangerously high anymore. Anyway, that's the story of how I got diagnosed. Next time, I'll talk a bit about how I fared when I first went on the antidepressants. Okay, it's time to talk about Doctor Who now. So, here's my 12th Doctor action figure, which I shall try to tuck into my hat to talk about Thin Ice. Now, those of you who watched my introduction video will remember that my Jodie Whittaker figure, fell out of my hat. And she landed on the ground with such force that I'm afraid the action figure began to regenerate. So now I'm stuck with having to keep my gob shut about who the next Doctor is. No, seriously, this is quite a balancing act. I've turned the brim up a bit wider, and I'm going to see if I can get him to grip the action figure to grip still not quite. Okay, now, does that look suitably ridiculous? Shall I back off a bit so I can get in full screen? Okay, Thin Ice. I drew this story randomly as I've been throwing all the stories randomly, the order I'd talk about them in. Now, this was written by Sarah Dollard, and when it was announced that Sarah Dollard would be returning to write in this season, I'll be honest, I didn't go skipping through the meadows. I didn't go, hooray! Because I had absolutely hated the previous contribution, Face the Raven. I'll not go into that too much here. At some point in the future, Face the Raven will come up on the random story generator, and I'll talk about Face the Raven. But in brief, I didn't enjoy it, but I think a lot of the things I didn't enjoy about it were not so much her fault, but things that Stephen Moffat had briefed had to be in the episode. So I feel that as a writer, she was probably quite restricted in what she could write in that episode. In this one, Thin Ice, she's got a much freer hand, and I think we get to see what she's capable of, and it's worlds apart for me. It's still not one of my favourite stories of this season, but it is decent. Now, the basic plot. I mean, if you tell someone the basic plot, we've got Regency England. We've got a rich entrepreneur who has got a giant fish chained to the bottom of the Thames. Is engineering ways for it to feed on human beings. Then is this is I mean when I say it out loud, is harvesting the fish poo and selling it off as an alternative solid fuel. I mean, yeah, I mean the premise is just ludicrous, but that's what it is. Now, there are a few interesting things about this story. The first thing I want to talk about is how it deals with racism. And obviously, Lord Sutcliffe, the entrepreneur, I mean, he's a massive racist. And the Doctor has a gut, visceral reaction against him in that, and he actually throws a punch. Now, it's very rare for the Doctor to throw a punch. We do see it. We've seen it a couple of times in the show before, but it is very rare, and it took me by surprise when I was watching it. And I'm not sure I approve, to be honest. I mean, I don't like the idea of the Doctor throwing punches like that, and obviously racism is something that still exists in society today, and I'm not sure throwing punches at people is a good way to deal with that. But anyway, that aside, it's made the Doctor's feelings very clear for all to see, and it's nice he stood up for Bill. Oh, but of course, I should mention Bill. This is only Bill's third story. She's gone through the fairly typical pattern of first adventure on Earth in her own time zone. Then she's gone to the future, and now she's in the past. I mean, we saw that play out with Rose, and I think similar pattern for Amy, and Martha, though for Martha it was the other way around. She did the past before the future. But anyway, it's a fairly standard issue thing in modern Doctor Who that the companion has her own time zone story, then they'll go to the past and the future, or the future and the past. So Bill goes into Regency England with a bit of trepidation. She's wondering, well, basically about the butterfly effect, and there's some nice moments early in the episode where a bit of banter with the Doctor where he's sort of joking about that. And the other most memorable thing in this episode for me is the death of the little boy, Spider. Again, Doctor Who tends to steer clear of killing children, and which, let's face it, a lot of the audience are children. They would, in some way, relate to the little boy, Spider. And they would see the Doctor as somebody protective. And when he was unable to save that little boy, now if I'd been watching that as a child, I might have found that quite traumatic. As an adult, it's still quite jarring, and of course, Bill has a go at him about it, and that there's a bit of tension between them in this episode as a result of that. That he can't save Spider, and because Bill questions his whole morality. But anyway, the story plays out, and of course, the fish ends up being released. And the surviving kids, live happily ever after with Lord Sutcliffe out of the way. The Doctor engineers it for them to inherit his estate. So it's a nice little morality tale. I mean, it's not one of my favourite Capaldi stories. We'll come to stuff which is much better than that, but I do enjoy it, and it's one of those stories that's grown on me over time. Looking back at when I first watched this story, I was missing Clara. I mean, I'll say right now, I'll tell you, Clara is my favourite companion of 21st century Doctor Who. I know she splits fans almost down the middle. Some people got very tired of her. Some people just couldn't get enough. I'm one of the ones who couldn't get enough. And I think that's another reason why I don't look that favourably on Face of Raven. But again, we'll come to that later. So I was missing Clara, so Bill had big shoes to fill. And thankfully, she didn't try to fill them. She put on an entirely different pair of shoes, went her own way, and by this story, I was starting to like her a lot. And I would get quite attached to her by the end of the season. So this is a good story. It's, like I say, not one of my favourites, but it with each viewing, I get something more out of it. And if Sarah Dollard ever comes back to writing for Doctor Who again, I'd be perfectly happy with it. I wouldn't feel the sense of trepidation that I felt last time. So, I think we'll take the Doctor out of my hat. Now, I told you all in my introduction video that the first two stories, this one, the next one, were already selected, and after that, I will be selecting them on screen. So, I already know what's coming next. So, I'll just grab the appropriate action figure to show you what's coming next. We're going into 20th century Doctor Who next episode. Here's my Colin Baker, the Sixth Doctor action figure. Because in the next episode, I'll be looking at one of the most iconic, get the right tongue in, this one isn't fitting today, one of the most iconic and also one of the most controversial at the time stories of 80s Doctor Who. Vengeance on Vardos. So I hope you join me for that one. Thank you for joining me for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell my friends. That'd be good too. Get the word out. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time when we'll be dipping into some 80s Doctor Who and talking a bit more about mental health and depression. Thank you for watching. Bye.